Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butts, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Item 13, a bi-weekly podcast covering everything African food, and I'm your host, Yom Tego. Every other week, we'll delve into the world of African food, chefs, curators, and bloggers. I hope you enjoy it. This week, I speak to Nargisse Benkabbou, a Moroccan chef, food blogger, and cookbook author. Nargisse was raised in Brussels, where she grew up in a strongly food-oriented family that continually nurtured her connection with her roots and country of origin. After living in Brussels and Paris, Nargisse moved to London to pursue her education in politics, only to realize that her love for cooking and food was a real passion. After training at Leiths School of Food and Wine, she started blogging and sharing her Moroccan recipes with a twist. Her work currently involves recipe and menu development, cooking classes, working as a guest chef, and hosting supper clubs. While she has a strong grasp of traditional Moroccan cuisine, her ultimate goal is to inspire and bring a breath of fresh air to Moroccan food. Here's our conversation. Welcome to Item 13, Nargisse. It's exciting to have you on. I haven't had, I take that back. I've had a Sudanese now so far, and so it's good to have a second North African representation on the show.
Thank you for having me, Yom.
This is going to be great, I think, because I love everything Morocco. I feel like Morocco is trending these days, so it'll be good to hear more about the food and sort of how you got into it. So let's start about talking about Nargisse. Like, who are you? What's your background? Tell us, who you are.
Yeah. Both my parents are Moroccan. They're from Morocco. My dad immigrated to Belgium when he was a teenager, and he met my mom. So I was born in Belgium, and my parents were very attached to their Moroccan roots. So they really raised us in a very Moroccan environment. I mean, culturally. So they kind of used food to keep us connected to our roots. So we ate Moroccan food at least once a day, whether there would always be something Moroccan, although we grew up in Belgium, where, it's a very Western country, and there's lots of great things like fries and burgers and pizza, obviously, but there was a lot of Moroccan influence, and I think they gave me this nostalgia somehow, and so after I went to university, I started working, but I always had this dream in the back of my head that I would love to focus on Moroccan food and do food because I loved food and eating and cooking, but also to promote my country in a certain way and give a different perspective, right. And modernize the food somehow, because I had all these different influences in me. I grew up in Belgium, spent a lot of time in Morocco. I lived in Paris and London, and traveled a lot, obviously. So I had so many influences, but I wanted to integrate that in the way I see food and Moroccan food, and kind of remove this old-fashioned way of plating the food and introduce. So yes, basically that's how I decided to start my blog. I noticed that there were no place online that focused on Moroccan food in a modern way, so that's what I did.
Yeah, so no, that's amazing, and it's always interesting to hear when people, the first generation, second generation Africans, whether they're living in Europe or in the States or Canada, how food is always sort of the way that they're connected back to their home roots.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And so in thinking about, growing up in Brussels, Belgium, was it easy for them then to find Moroccan ingredients, right? Because they're making Moroccan food, you said, every day. Was it easy to find?
Yeah, well, I mean, back then, it wasn't hard because there's such a huge Moroccan community in Belgium. There's a very, very big community. So Moroccan ingredients were very easily accessible. But I think nowadays, with globalization, you can find ingredients to make Moroccan food pretty much everywhere.
Right, yeah.
First of all, we don't use a lot of strange, ingredients.
Yeah.
Most of the ingredients are accessible in most supermarkets, and it's more things maybe like spices that are different. And nowadays, you find them very easily in London, cities like London. It's so easy,
Okay.
can easily find.
Yeah. So then you made the decision to move to London, but not to cook per se. You started by pursuing a master's in policy. Like, what was that decision? Why did you decide to do?
So before that, I studied politics, and I did a master in politics and sociology. And I mean, I did academia, and I just thought it was the right thing to do. Also. And I'm sure, all African, Middle Eastern families, the right thing to do is go to university, have a degree. Probably not work in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I was just doing the right thing and going to university and doing something very intellectual.
Right.
So I just continued on my path, and I was very passionate about social development. So I did a master in public policy here in London, and I specialized on women's rights in the Middle East and all the changes that are happening or could potentially happen in Islamic law.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was very interesting. Then I started working, and I just didn't really. I was not very happy in my corporate job, and also not doing something. I was dreaming that I would change the world and work on the field and things like that. And it's just, it was not what I had envisioned. So, and also the corporate world was a bit of a very big downside for me. I didn't like staying in an office. So, I met my husband, and he was very encouraging, encouraging me to go to cooking school, so that's what I did.
Okay, so let's talk about that then. So, you worked in policy for a little bit, and then like a lot of it feels like that also. I don't want to call it a trend, but I just think that the generation now, the world has just opened so many possibilities that, maybe our parents and grandparents didn't have. And so it's not so much that, we are lazy, entitled people. I just think that we just have, a whole world of opportunities, and you're always trying to figure out, what is my heart's true calling versus this is the thing I have to do. That's my duty,
Yeah, definitely. I think there's also, I think our generation we're definitely seeking fulfillment more than just paycheck.
Exactly.
That way it can be confusing sometimes for us. Because we want to be fulfilled, but we also want to have a lot of money in our bank account. So there's always work. I definitely didn't feel very fulfilled in my corporate job. So I just had that doing something where I use my senses, such as cooking, would would definitely be more interesting and fun.
Right. So then let's talk about that. So did you start your blog before you went to cooking school, or was it the other way around? And what was the decision to go to a formal cooking school, and what was it like?
Well, so when I realized that I didn't want to work and have like a proper office job, I thought about a lot of different things that I could do. And the first one that came to mind was doing something with Moroccan food and cooking. But at the same time, I realized that I was I think 27 back then. And it was like I was a mother who had cooked 25 years for her children and her family and had like big, solid Moroccan cooking experience. So I thought I need some credibility. How can I get this credibility? And also I felt like maybe I could learn a few things, although I've always liked cooking, especially since I left my parents' place. That's what kind of forced me to start cooking my own food. So I was a confident cook, but I felt that I would benefit from that. So that's why I went to cooking school, and it was definitely very useful because I learned so much and I gained even more confidence.
And cooking school was in London, right? Or in Paris? Like, where did you?
Yes, it was in London. I went to Leiths, School of Food and Wine.
So what was the structure like? So for people that are, because I know I know a lot of people, African food businesses in particular, that dabble in their own either food blogs or they are home cooks and they want to take it to the next level. What, if you think about like practically speaking, what did you get from like being in school that you didn't know from like intuitively cooking your own food? Like what sort of lesson was it? Business skills wise, plating?
I think I would say the discipline that you need to have in the kitchen.
Okay.
Because simple things like you don't really, if you want to know what's going on in the pan, you just need to look at it and you sense it. It's just as simple as that, right? But when you don't just, calm down and think, okay, is this cooked? Is this not cooked? What is this? Why is this happening? What did it burn? When you try to understand what's going on, you have all the answers. And it's something very simple, but it became very obvious to me when I went to cooking school. And just the discipline that if you want to do a dinner party for X, or you need to cook for 50 people, you need to incorporate discipline in what you're going to do, and do a lot of planning before that. And it's something that helped me avoid mistakes in the kitchen and save time.
Yeah.
So that's what I learned. Then, there was also like a few techniques that I was not familiar with, obviously. But I think there's a million techniques that I'm not familiar with anyway, that I will never be familiar with. But I think it's the practice. I would say that. But things like plating, I have to say, I became comfortable with it just by doing it for my blog every day after day. Just you get better at it. But it was definitely useful for me. Also, just how you develop a recipe is also something. From adjusting the ingredients and just some logic, knowing that you need to add a bit of acidity and sweetness. Just being logical when it comes to food.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think, if anyone that's listening, I think that sort of discipline, especially as you start to cook for more people than just your family, that making sure that, what you cook is also, even though you're staying true to what you're cooking, that it's still appealing to a wider audience. So I think that's all helpful. And you talked about blogging while you were in school. So did you start the blog while in school? Because I follow your Instagram page and your blog also. Beautiful pictures. I don't know if you also took photography lessons or like how that all came together.
Thank you. No, I didn't take any photography lessons. I just learned. I read a lot of blogs about food photography, and a lot of bloggers said what you have to do is look yourself and practice and practice and practice. So that's what I did, and that's how I got better eventually. Because that's how you develop your own style. Well, I think it's good to inspire yourself from different photographers or food bloggers that you like. But with time, you develop your own style, and that's what matters. And so right after when I finished cooking school, I had a lot of different ideas of things I wanted to do, and I could have chose the classic route and start working in the kitchen. But I thought that I could definitely do something about Moroccan cooking online because it did not exist. So it was a bit risky, obviously, but I thought if I invest my time in that, I'm very dedicated, hopefully I will be able to make a difference. So thankfully, that's what happens. And,
So, that's interesting because
it's the fourth year.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that's interesting because, like you said, it's not a traditional way to go. Like you go to cooking school, and most people will end up in a kitchen, right? So you decided to go. Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, one obviously because you have that expertise in Moroccan food, but did you also think about potentially working in a Moroccan kitchen, or that just wasn't an option?
I wasn't sure. I mean, the thing is, I was in London, so there were no Moroccan restaurants. For me, I definitely considered working in restaurants. But very quickly, I started having opportunities to work as a consultant and do events, and so somehow I was lucky that I didn't have to do that. There's obviously a learning curve for everything. So the first event was very stressful for me because it was the first, and I hadn't done that before, and I was by myself. So, but with time and practice, things get better.
Right.
Thankfully.
So what was that? How did you, can you talk through how you got that first opportunity, right? So you've come out of school and you're thinking about doing your first, who approached you, and then sort of how did you,
So the first company that approached me was it's a company that makes baby food, interestingly, and they wanted to create. Yeah, the name is For Aisha, and they're quite massive in the UK, and I think in other countries too. And they were launching the brand, and they wanted to extend the range of products they had, and they wanted to have something that was more like dishes that were exotic. So I developed recipes for them. So I remember it was my first. It was the first time I was approached, and I was like, "Oh wow!" And I think I had done that for a few months back then, and it was the first opportunity I had.
No, that sounds good. And I think, and since then you've hosted supper clubs, I've seen cooking classes, and you continue to do recipe and menu development, right?
Yes, I continue to do that.
Okay. So, I mean, I think let's take a short break now, and then when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about Moroccan cuisine and your cookbook. So, for those who are listening that are not familiar with Moroccan cuisine, we'll give them sort of a crash course on, the different types of cuisine from the different parts of Morocco, the work that you do, and then the cookbook that I don't think it's just now because it's been about a year now, right? That your book, since your book came out.
It's almost a year. In May it will be a year, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
it would be a year in the UK, yeah. Sorry, but yeah, we'll talk about it.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Let's take a break now. So now let's talk about Moroccan food. So when I think about Moroccan food, I think like tagine, I think couscous, I think about the spices that we talked about. I think about aromatic spices. I can picture mounds and mounds of spices in big bowls in a colorful market. Like that's what I think when I think Moroccan food. So what are some of your earliest memories of Moroccan food? Like I know you grew up eating Moroccan food in Belgium, but do any specific memories stick out for you?
Oh wow. I think one of my earliest memory is something we eat for breakfast called bisara.
Okay.
And it's basically a split pea fava bean soup / dip. So you cook them and then you you process them in a food processor until they become like a puree, and you eat them with a lot of olive oil. So it's like a hummus, but it's very, it's like more soupy, if it makes sense.
Okay.
Like it's more runny. So yeah, it's one of my earliest memories. We eat that with bread and lots of olive oil. And I remember when I was very small, I didn't like it, and I didn't like the color. And I would wake up and smell. The fat, and now I love it.
Yeah, those just like it's the smell of food just brings back some really good memories. So then let's talk about, Moroccan food now. So if we wanted to give people a crash course in Moroccan food, someone who's never seen or heard about Morocco, how would you describe it, and what are some of the main courses that, define what Moroccan food is?
Well, I think it's a very eclectic cuisine in the sense that it's very diverse, because Morocco is a diverse country. You have mountains, you have desert, you have the coast, we have different coasts, the Mediterranean coast and the Atlantic coast. So there's a lot of everything. So it's very eclectic, but it's also influenced by a lot of different countries. So we had the Arabs, we had the French, we had the Ottomans, the Moors. So it's a myriad of spices and different techniques. And I just feel like it's the best of everything put together. Honestly, that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But I think if you go to, if you check a Moroccan food book, even a very traditional one, everyone will find a dish at least that they like, because it covers really everything. And yeah, as you mentioned, it's very spicy, very spiced and aromatic.
And then what so you said before that, there's nothing strange, there's no strange ingredients that you wouldn't find outside of maybe the spices.
Yeah.
So like, what are maybe the proteins that you would typically have? Like, if you think of a family meal, like what are the different sort of components that you'd have for a typical Moroccan family meal?
Oh, typical Moroccan family meal would be the tagine with a meze next to it. So tagine can be, very traditionally, strictly speaking, a tagine has a kind of meat or fish.
Okay.
But nowadays, obviously, you have so many different kinds of vegetarian and vegan tagines. It's very, very common, even in Morocco. And it's, basically a tagine is a spice stew, and something that you cook. And the reason why you cook it for a long time is usually because we use kind of tough cuts of meat that require a long time. And that's how you get all the spices into their aroma, because you need the spices to cook if you want your tagine to taste nice. So you can just put a spice and then be like, okay, that's fine. No, you need time, because the ingredient is really, really time when you make a tagine. Right. But it's basically a stew with vegetables. And then the meze around it will be all the kind of salad, can be hot or cold, that we eat at the beginning of the meal. And we have things like loug that's made of aubergine, bakura that's made with mallow. You can make it with kale. There's so many of them. It's endless. Every single vegetable that we cook. A lot of fava bean, it's like simple tomato and cucumber salad. It's just very refreshing, and it's important for us to have a tagine and vegetables and the meze, yeah.
And then would you typically also have a dessert? And what sort of desserts do you have, and what do you make them of?
Fruits. Traditionally, it's fruits.
Oh, interesting.
And in Moroccan homes and Moroccan dialects, when we say dessert, we use the word dessert. The same word, and it means fruits, basically. What fruits are going to have at the end of the meal. Interesting. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. That's a new learning thing for me. Okay. And then I know that with the work that you do with food, so one of the aims or one of the goals that you have is to add a modern flair, right, to to Moroccan cuisine. And I'm sure if you follow the food world, fusion is a big theme as a lot of ethnic food goes global. People are trying to put their own twist on it, whether they're, making it a little bit more French, a little bit more Japanese, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
What are your thoughts on that? And then what do you think about, maintaining the authenticity of that, the local food, while making it accessible to a wider audience, or let's say even a Western audience, right? Because you want to, to introduce them to the food, but you also at the same time don't want to lose the
authenticity and the soul of what makes it special. Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good question, and I think about it very often. Well, I think first of all, if you want to make the food more global, whether it's Western or any introduces food to another part of the world that's not familiar with this food, one has to understand and just accept the fact that you're going to have to tweak a few things, whether it's the ingredients that won't be accessible, that people won't be familiar with, or it will be the techniques, or sometimes flavors can be too strong or even too spicy or too hot. You kind of need to adapt it and change a little bit of what makes it very traditional. But I think there's a limit of how far you can go, and when you've been eating a certain kind of food all your life, I think you can understand how far you can go and the limit to not break in order to make it global, but also keep the soul of the food and all the flavors, because the flavors have to be there. Or the ingredients that make a special dish have to be there too. But I think it's obviously a challenge because it's very easy to add a Moroccan ingredient to anything and then say, "Oh, it's Moroccan fusion." But I always tell people when they ask me, I made a tagine with this, it's not very traditional. I always tell them, if you know it's not traditional, it's a good thing. But if it tastes good, it's not a problem. Who cares? As long as what you eat is nice and makes you happy. If it's a tagine with a spice that's not traditional, it's fine. It's not a problem.
Right.
It's just important to know that it's not traditional. Obviously, if someone said, if I would make something that's, let's say, Chinese and then call it Moroccan, then it won't be right. And I think it's important to know, to preserve the knowledge of the food when you talk about it or when you share it. But changing it is absolutely fine.
I think that's a good way of thinking about it. Like sharing, saying what, this is my twist to. I will go back to tagine. This is my twist on tagine. So people are clear that it's a twist and that the way it's traditionally done is X, but I'm adding this X twist to it to make it a little bit more interesting. So that works. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that works. And so, speaking of bringing, food to different audiences, let's switch now and talk about your cookbook, Casablanca, which again, like I've seen beautiful, beautiful pictures. I don't know if you took your own pictures or if somebody did that for you.
I take all the pictures for my blog and my social media. I'm the one who takes all the pictures. But for the book, it was not me. It was a man called Matt Twerfel. He's a professional food photographer, and he did a great job.
Yeah.
And I was definitely not confident enough to change it.
Well, you should be. Just from your blog alone and, your profile on Instagram, you take amazing pictures. So, you should be proud of the progress you've made in that realm. So let's start with, why did you decide to do a cookbook? You've done the training in school, you're doing all the supper clubs, you're working with different brands and, whether it's recipe development or just co-packing with them or cooking classes, etc. Why the decision to do a cookbook?
I had the blog, obviously, but and the blog, allows me to connect with so many people and, so many people who try my recipes, and makes me very, very happy and proud every time. But I just thought it would be interesting to have a different medium to connect with people, because not everyone likes online recipes. A lot of my friends would tell me, recipes are great, but I just don't like, to check them online, although it's weird for a generation.
Right.
And also, I think having a physical medium that's not just floating somewhere on the web also was important for me. And if my blog disappears tomorrow, it's like my work or social media disappears tomorrow. It's like it didn't exist.
Right.
But if I have a book, I know, it should be there for quite a while. So it just feels more real and it's just different. And another way to promote Moroccan food and the extension of what I want to do. But yeah, I mean, there's not a big difference between the recipes in the book and my blog in terms of content. Obviously, they're all different, but I mean, some recipes are traditional, made more accessible. Some recipes are very fusion. Yeah, it's very similar, but it's just a different medium.
Yeah. So you talk about, the content being a little bit similar to what's in your blog. So if someone's thinking about, or, if someone is just curious about the process of publishing a cookbook, so you decide today, I want to do a cookbook. Like what are the steps that you went through in terms of deciding what recipes go into the cookbook? How are you going to organize it? Are you going to publish it yourself, or, finding a publisher and that sort of?
Yeah. Well, so I had a book deal before. I had actually all the recipes written down.
Oh, okay.
So there are different ways to make it happen, but I basically got in touch with a publisher who said, "Why not? I'd like to see a proposal."
Yeah.
So when you want to have a publisher, you need to write a proposal for a cookbook or even for fiction.
Yeah.
And the proposal is supposed to be like a smaller version of the book, and then talk about what makes it so special and things like that. Talk about your background, why you want to do it, etc., etc. And then so I worked on that with my agent, and when we felt confident with the proposal, then we submitted to different publishers, and then I had a book deal. And then that's when they kind of agree on a certain amount of recipes. So I think we agreed on about like 100 or slightly less.
Ooh.
And then once I had 100 recipes, that's when I had to start working, because I had some recipes for the proposal.
Right.
And obviously I didn't want to use recipes for my blog.
Right.
Because it wouldn't be interesting to use the recipes on my blog, so I had to come up with new things. And so that's what I did. So I spent a lot of time brainstorming ideas and recipes, and then when I felt that I had a solid list of things I want to do, knowing that when I will try them, I might not like them. So yeah, that's when I was recipe testing basically for almost a year.
Wow, because I'm thinking about 100 recipes. So meaning that even for shooting, I don't know if you have a picture. So I know there's a lot of pictures and I flipped it, but I don't know if there's a picture for every recipe. So did you have to create and shoot like each of the 100 recipes?
You mean for the book?
Yeah, for the book.
There's a whole team that does that. So I didn't do everything by myself.
Okay.
So there's someone who cooks the recipe, someone who styles the recipe,
and then
the photographer. And that's how you can get a lot done.
Yeah.
In one time.
Yeah. Okay,
like my book was shot, I would say, in 7 days.
Oh my God.
But it's very intense work. I mean, it's a lot of recipes.
Yeah, that sounds,
a lot of things to cook and to shoot.
Crazy. Interesting. And so if you had to pick, and I know it's going to be difficult, what's your favorite recipe from the book?
Well, it's going to be hard, but I'm going to say the one that I'm craving at the moment.
Okay.
That I haven't done in a while. I'm craving the merguez burger.
Okay.
So, merguez is a kind of sausage, and it's basically the meat that's inside the sausage that I make into a burger.
Okay.
And I like to make the meat from scratch. So it's basically a mix. I use a mix of minced lamb and minced beef.
Ooh.
Lots of spices. It's just amazing. So I think I'm gonna make it soon.
That sounds good. Yeah, that sounds really good. Okay, I think we can now transition to rapid fire. But before we do that, can you let people know where they can find you online, if they want to buy the cookbook, where you're on social media handles, etc.?
Sure. So my blog is called mymoroccanfood.com. And then all my social media handles are My Moroccan Food. It's pretty easy.
Yeah.
And then my book was published by Firefly, and it's available pretty much everywhere where books are sold. And yes, and it came out in the US and Canada in September.
Okay, and the book is called Casablanca, right? So people know it.
And it's called Casablanca, My Moroccan Food. Yes, I forgot to say that. Casablanca, yes, by Casablanca.
I think it's called Casablanca. Okay, great. So now we're going to transition to the rapid fire segment of the interview, where I'll just ask you, a quick question, and you just tell me which one is your favorite or not, or the first sort of answer that comes top of mind to you. They're not difficult questions at all, I don't think.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Dine in or take out?
Dine in.
Are you a morning person or a night person?
None of them.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Do you prefer Instagram or Twitter?
I keep going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. And then sweet or salty?
Ooh. Salty.
I know that's hard.
Hard.
And then who's your dream African chef, I would say, to cook with? If you had to pick an African chef that you would like to cook with one day or work with?
Well, there's a chef called Mourad Lahlou, and he's a Moroccan chef from Marrakesh, and he opened a restaurant, actually several restaurants in the U.S., in San Francisco, and his restaurant makes wonderful Moroccan food, and I would love to cook with him.
Oh, cool. Is he only based in San Francisco in the U.S., or...?
Only in San Francisco.
Okay.
I've never been, but I would love to go.
Yeah, that sounds good. And last question. It's a sentence that I want you to complete. This year, I'm going to try and eat more what?
Fruits.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
More dessert, you mean?
I tend to put them in my smoothies, but I never really eat them anymore.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same, actually. I eat fruits and vegetables. I just blend it away.
Yeah, it's just easier. And I don't feel guilty, but I think it's important to grab a fruit, like an apple and
just
and get a bite of the apple and chew it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Now, this has been great. Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I think we've all learned a little bit more about Moroccan cuisine, and your book Casablanca. Let's say Casablanca is out and it's available.
Thank you for having me. It was very nice talking to you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Item 13, an Essence 13 production. If you like the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes. To keep up to date on news and events from Essence 13, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Essence and the number 13. Thank you.